Your singing moves and shakes the ground. Your beckon brings the rain in drought. Your glory spins the earth around, and your whisper makes your fire fall down. And there's no other name, the name that sets the ruby ages. There's no other name, there's no other name like yours, Jesus, like yours, Jesus. There's no other name, there's no other name like yours, Jesus, like yours, Jesus. Your word commands the wind and waves. Your touch revives the sick and lame. Your power wakes the dead again, and your love destroys the grip of sin. Hallelujah! Oh, your love destroys the grip of sin. There's no other name, there's no other name like yours, Jesus, like yours, Jesus. There's no other name, there's no other name like yours, Jesus, like yours, Jesus. There's no other name, there's no other name like yours, Jesus, like yours, Jesus. There's no other name, there's no other name like yours, Jesus, like yours, Jesus. No other name, oh, that has the power to save, oh, but Jesus. And every knee will bow, and every tongue confess that name of Jesus. Come on, sing it out. And every knee will bow, and every tongue confess the name of Jesus. So every knee will bow, and every tongue confess the name of Jesus. Oh, every knee will bow, and every tongue confess the name of
so a few days ago, I had one of those Christmas panic moments. I was just sort of adding it all up in my head. You know, you'd gotten a little for this one, and a little for that one, and a lot for that one, and a lot, and then you kind of were adding it up because you had more to do. There were more people on the list, but then you were adding up what you'd already spent, and there was that, like, maybe a little lump. And you're, right? I mean, like, the eggnog was awesome until the morning after. You thought that would be a great thing to just tell your boss what you were really thinking until after you said it. It's all awesome until it's not, right? So let's do it this way. A few years ago, my wife and I had this strange conversation that was only strange for me. Made perfect sense to her, but it was a little bit strange for me. See, I'll take you way back. Before I got married, my wife had a dream to have 4 children. That was her dream. She wanted 4 children. I wanted her. Therefore, I wanted 4 children. So we got married. And you always wait, or at least you try and wait for a little while. And I was kind of getting used to the way things were. I kind of liked coming home and whatever I had left on the table was still there. I liked the idea of opening the cupboard and there was food in it. If I didn't finish all my drink, I could put it in the fridge, shut it, go back an hour later, and it's still in the refrigerator. I would go over to friends' houses, and man, the place was a wreck. And there's plastic toys everywhere, and those tacky contraptions that you put babies in so they can eat. You spend all this money on the dining room, and then there's this plastic thing over there. And it's never clean. It's never clean. It has the remnant of 7 meals around it and in it and under it. I got in a friend's car one time, I opened the door, and just stuff fell out. It just started falling out. I didn't want my car to look like that. I didn't want the house to look like that. I didn't want to have to step over one of those stupid gates to get into the kitchen. And there began to be this part of my conversation. People would say, after a few years, they get to wondering, when are you guys having kids? And I'd say, never. And I'd laugh. Ha ha ha. And they'd laugh. Ha ha ha. But every time I think I was starting to believe this. And then finally my wife says, when you say that all the time, you're not serious, right? And I'm like, I think I was. Should I not be? Like, what are you thinking? I mean, this is a great life, right? You and me go wherever we want to, do what, like whatever. No, she says. I want 4 kids. And so I began to calculate the cost. Braces, school, presents, bicycles. I mean, the list, it just went on and on and on and on and on. And then I finally came to a place where, after calculating the cost enough, I was comfortable with stepping into this next phase of life. And we began having kids. And it was the most awesome thing ever. And so about a year or 2 ago, this is when we had this conversation. And we're standing in the house, And they're all there, and they all have friends over that day for some reason. And there are like 18 pair of shoes at the front door that you trip over when you come in. There are empty cups littered all over the home as if it's a park, a public park where dogs use the restroom. And I looked at all this nonsense and chaos, and I said to her, "What were you thinking 13 years ago?" And she says, "I wasn't." I was stunned. "What do you mean you weren't thinking? Because this is exactly what I saw. I saw all of this." "What did you see?" "Nothing. I didn't even think about it." "Really?" Now here's my point, and here's where I'm going with all of this today. God has greatness for you. He has peace for you. He has more than you could imagine for you. But there's a cost. Go with me, if you would, to Luke chapter 2. We're going to stay right there. We've seen Jesus preaching in the temple. Last week we saw where his parents had done everything that there was to do, and then grace and favor came. And today we're going to be at the beginning of that moment that we saw last week. So here the parents have just walked into the temple. And in Luke chapter 2, beginning at verse 25, says, "Now there was a man in Jerusalem whose name was Simeon. And this man was righteous and devout, waiting for the consolation of Israel. And the Holy Spirit was upon him. And it had been revealed to him by the Holy Spirit that he would not see death before he had seen the Lord's Christ. And he came in the Spirit into the temple. And when the parents brought in the child Jesus to do for him according to the custom of the law, he took him up in his arms and blessed God and said, 'Lord, now you are letting your servant depart in peace, according to your word. For my eyes have seen your salvation, that you have prepared in the presence of all peoples, a light for redemption to the Gentiles, revelation to the Gentiles, and for glory to your people Israel.' And his father and his mother marveled at what was said about him. And Simeon blessed them and said to Mary his mother, 'Behold, this child is appointed for the fall and rising of many in Israel, and for a sign that is opposed, and a sword will pierce through your own soul also, so that thoughts from many hearts may be revealed.' And there was a prophetess, Anna, the daughter of Phanuel of the tribe of Asher. She was advanced in years, having lived with her husband 7 years from when she was a virgin, and then as a widow until she was 84. She did not depart from the temple, worshiping with fasting and prayer night and day. And coming up at that very hour, she began to give thanks to God and to speak of him to all who were waiting for the redemption of Jerusalem." So we see here in this very moment where when Simeon said his first words, they were amazed. They marveled at what he said about the child. I think sometimes we have lost the amazement or the marvel about what God would say about us or thought about us or what our parents said about us when we were just infants. Before there were all the false negatives that were placed within us. Before all the undue criticism was given to us. Before a few mistakes or a few failures. Before a little life was lived that has frustrated us or held us back a little. Before any of that, God saw us and declared great things over us. And my question is, do we still marvel over what is said about us? Are we still amazed at God in us? Or do we find ourselves walking around with an attitude that has been formed not by God in heaven, but rather formed by the world around us? When you think about you, what do you think? Do you think of all the things that you're not? All the things that you don't have, all the things that you would like to do but you can't do, all the things that you want to someday do but you doubt that you ever will? What do you think about when you think about you? Do you marvel? Is it amazing? Is it wondrous? Or is it frustrating? And sometimes we have to peel it all away and just get back to the gospel and see that what God did was good. So that when you think about you, you are amazed. Let's take this back to the very, very beginning. When God made everything, before the Word had become flesh, when the Word was simply with God and the Word was God, and when everything that was created through Him. What about in that moment? God made the sun and He made the moon. And what did He say about both of them? They're good. One a light in the night, the other a light in the day. One lesser, one greater. But what did He say about both of them? They're good. What did He say about seasons that He created to be under the stars? The summer, the winter, the fall, the spring. What did He say? It's good. Summer and winter, fall and spring, He called good. God made trees, magnificent trees, and then tiny, pathetic little plants. What did He say about both? It's good. He made a cow, and then He made you. And what did He say? It's good. See, the only reason why we don't believe about us what we should believe about us is because we get into this comparison trap where we're comparing this to that. And because maybe this seems more favorable than that, we think this is better. And if we affiliate more or associate more or look more or sound more like this thing, then this is better. But when God looks at it both, what does He say? It's good. And therefore, in this comparison, we need to quit adding value to the comparison and just recognize the difference and embrace the diversity, recognizing that in the diversity of creation, God said all of it was good. So when I look at myself or I look at someone else, what do I see? Good. I see God made them good. I see God made myself good. I see what God made as good. And I realize that this gets really simple and basic. But for us to embrace the rest of the text, I think we have to begin with understanding what God sees when He sees us. It was the psalmist who said in Psalm chapter 139 and verse 13, "You formed me in my mother's womb. You knitted me together. I am fearfully and wonderfully made. I praise you. Wonderful are your works. My soul knows it very well." When the word in the Old Testament, soul, is used, it's the same word in the New Testament that we would say spirit or heart. There comes a place where what we know very well has to go deep. It can't be just something that we think, I'm awesome, I think I'm good, I think I'm good, I'm thinking. No. It's in the depth of us we believe that because Christ is in us, that there is goodness, that I am good. Why? Because God created me and He looked at me and He said, good. And your soul has to know it very well. And that may mean that at times when there are relationships or there are things that you're placing in you that are against that or they're arguing with that idea, that you have to have enough sense to put that aside, to step away from that so that you can come back to that place where you understand very well in your soul that you are good. I find it no coincidence that when the prophet went up to raise a little boy from the dead, he went up by himself. I find it no coincidence that when Jesus went to raise the dead, He emptied the room. I find it no coincidence that Peter, having known the story of the prophet and had been there with Jesus, recognized that he had to get away from it all, that he could raise the dead. There comes a point in our lives where when that idea of you being good is dead, it's time to push everything else away from you and just get in the presence of God, that your soul can know it very well. Because if you don't believe about you what God believes about you, you'll have a hard time doing the thing that God has set apart for you to do. We have to believe first that we are who God created us to be so that we can embrace very well what God has called us to do. Because when we go past that, He made us well, now we get into the good things that He's created for us to do. Ephesians chapter 2 and verse 10, it becomes very clear to us that we are created. We are created in Christ Jesus for good works, which God prepared beforehand that we should walk in them. So when He made you for something that He'd already planned to happen. Capture that. God saw something that needed to happen on the earth that He had already prepared to happen. And when it was time for that thing to happen, He created you to do it. So you're not too old, you're not too young, you're not somewhere stuck in the middle. You're exactly where you need to be according to the plan of God to do the good thing that He's placed for you to do right now in this hour. Sometimes at Christmas we get a little bit kind of sideways because all of a sudden it changes a little bit. You know, sometimes you might have been, I got a Christmas card the other day, and this awesome family, and the mom was talking about how this is the first year she did not have to make a turkey. The first year. Because one of her daughters got married and they were doing the cooking this year. And man, in that little paragraph, she embraced that idea with gladness. For years, she's been slaving in the kitchen. For years, she's had that hot heat billowing out of that stupid turkey. This year, what does she get to do? She gets to sit on the couch and be the sage of wisdom for that family. She gets to just sit back and look at those little babies. She gets to sit back and look at her family and just impart wisdom into them because she's not slaving over a bird. Some of you should be slaving over the bird right now. And some of you should be enjoying the place where God has you right now. And here's the thing, they are both works. They both need to be done. They're both hugely important. Which one are you best suited for in this hour to do? Because that's what God has for you. There's a time to be in the trenches digging. And there's a time to be up in the rafters pointing and clicking and saying it goes here, it goes there, it goes over there. Why? Because wisdom had seen that before. There is great wisdom at certain stages of life that's not there when there's just youthfulness and vitality and more energy than you can even point. Right? Where are you in that space? What does God have for you this hour? There is a work that He prepared beforehand that needed to be done right now. And if you were born years and years ago, that means there are moments of wisdom that need to be spoken today, that you have finally reached that place where it's time for you to stop doing so much and start speaking a little more. And then some of you, it's the doing where God has you, and in the doing, you need to be doing. And the thing is, we embrace it all. Because when I'm not comparing the bird to the couch speaking wisdom, I just see it both as good. I can embrace my position and I can embrace someone else's, and we can all live and work in harmony doing the things that God has created us to do. And that might be necessary on Christmas Day for a few of you, just throwing it out there. No, there's work for us. And sometimes we think, I just don't know. I don't know if I can do that. I don't know if I can do that. Paul went further in Ephesians chapter 3 and verse 19. He was praying a prayer. And in that prayer, in that moment, he said, I desire for you all to be full of the fullness of God. There are some of us who have grown content with a certain level of God, and we're really not wanting more, but we're not full yet. There is a fullness of God that has been prophesied for us. There is a fullness of God that we should be desiring. If you are in the same place in your Christian walk where you were 2 years ago or 2 months ago or 20 years ago, there should be a greater desire in you now, maybe even more than it's ever been, for you to step from glory to glory, where there's a transformation, another click in the layer, where you go from this layer to that layer, where there's a desire to be full of the fullness of God. I don't want just what I had. What I had was awesome when I had it, but now it's been a few years. Now it's been a few months. Now there's a greater desire for more. Why? Because there's a fullness that I have not experienced. If I can read through the Gospels, if I can go through the book of Acts, and I can see something that my life has neither seen nor experienced, then what I see that I have neither seen nor experienced should wake something up in me to desire that. What we've gotten into a habit of in our generation is we see something that we don't have, so we immediately think that's not for us. That you would be full of the fullness of God. And then he goes on and blows my mind, because he says it this way: to him who is able to do far more abundantly than we could ask or think, according to the power, watch this, at work in us. To him be all the glory. To him who is able to do exceedingly abundantly beyond. To him, according to his power, the power at work in us. The works that he prepared beforehand that we should walk in them. The works that he saw, which is why he created us and set us in this particular generation to do something fantastic in the earth. But you can't believe that about you if you can't believe the first part, that you're good. Yeah, but what about the mistakes? He's greater than your mistakes. Yeah, you say that. You say that. No, I don't say that. He says that. John says if our heart condemns us, he's greater than our heart. He didn't say if the Spirit convicts us. When the Spirit convicts us, we fix it. When our hearts condemn us, condemnation, here's what condemnation is. Condemnation is feeling bad about something that you've already repented of. That's condemnation. There is therefore now no more condemnation. I don't have condemnation for past stupidity that I repented of and therefore placed under the sacrifice of Jesus. Therefore, there's no past mistake that I have repented of that keeps me from moving forward. What will keep me from moving forward is something that I have not repented of, and I can't move past the conviction. You can't push the Spirit away. He's going to be right there convicting you, but you can push away the condemning voices. Because catch this one, John 14:12. Jesus said, whoever believes in me will also do the works that I do. And even greater works than these will he do, because I am going to the Father. You can do the greater works because he went to the Father. When he went to the Father, he sent to you the Holy Spirit. The Holy Spirit at work within you is the one that gives you the power to do the works that he set apart for you to do before you were even created. And when it came time for them to be done, then he sent you. Blows my mind to think that what needs to be done on the earth today, specific to this place, he has placed within you the power to do it. So whatever happened in a previous generation, whatever happened in a previous moment, whether 1700s, 1800s, like I read about revivals sometimes in those eras. Awesome, great, that's cool. That just reminds me God does it. But here's what I'm a little more focused on. What is the work that we are to do in our generation in the revival that we are to see? Yeah, but we're not like Jonathan Edwards. We're better. We're better. Because what needs to be done in this hour, God chose us. He didn't choose Jonathan Edwards for our era. He didn't choose John Wesley for our era. He didn't choose Kenneth E. Hagin for our area. He chose us. He chose us. He didn't choose somebody else to raise your kids. He chose you to raise you. Look at those kids. Oh, my Lord, what am I going to do? Exactly what he created you to do. God created you to do that. But do you believe it? And so I needed you to believe all of that. I need you to grasp all of that because this is where the other shoe drops. See, Simeon lifted up the child and he said all those great things. He will be a light to the Gentiles. He will be revelation. He called him salvation. He blessed Joseph and Mary. Those are high times. But then he said to Mary, your soul, the sword will pierce your soul as well. After the greatness that we embrace, now we have to embrace the cost. And we have to do it in such a way that doesn't disappoint us so much that we're no longer willing to be excited about the reward or the works. So the other day, I was invited to talk to a group of elementary kids. And so I went into the classroom, and it was awesome. These kids are full of energy, and they introduced me, and I come up, and they're all just like you would expect elementary kids to be. And this little guy on the front row, he says, hey, are you a football player? I looked at him, and I said, no, I'm a preacher. He goes, And I think sometimes that can be us when the cost is presented. It's like the young man who came to Jesus and he said, I want to be perfect. He says, well, just do all the law. I've already done that. What he's saying is, I've already done what the law has told me to do, but I still feel an emptiness inside. I still feel like I haven't quite gotten to the place where I'm doing the thing that you've called and created me to do. I'm not quite there yet. I've done all the stuff that's been prescribed on paper, but I need to go to the throne and find out what is the other thing that I need to do so that I'll feel like I need that peace, Jesus. I didn't get it all here. I need that peace. And Jesus says, oh, well then take all that you have, sell it, give it to the poor, and follow me. It was the cost. It wasn't the desire. The desire was there. But when the cost came, all of a sudden he wasn't willing. We have to be careful that we don't let the cost push us away. See, let's go to the life of Mary. Let's think about her for a minute. An angel came to her and spoke out of Isaiah 7. Said, you're going to conceive the Son of God. That was the great soaring prophecy that said that Emmanuel would be born of a virgin, that governments, powers would be on his shoulders. His kingdom would have no end. From the hugeness of that prophecy, this angel said to Mary, you're going to be the virgin that will give birth to Emmanuel. And now we have this Simeon moment where it's not Isaiah 7 anymore. Now it's Isaiah 53, where the same prophet, speaking of the same person, would speak of he would be wounded for our transgressions. He would be pierced for our iniquities. And now Simeon says the same piercing that was prophesied of that child, that's going to pierce your soul also. See, moms have a tendency to carry a greater responsibility for the next generation. I appreciate all that, and I want to be careful here, But I appreciate all that God has called women to do uniquely in our generation. But I think sometimes what gets lost in all the conversation is a unique calling, not just to this generation, but to the next one. And in this prophecy from Simeon, it was not given to Joseph. Here in this moment, we realize Joseph isn't going to be there. We realize Mama's going to be there, though. And there is a piercing in her soul that she would feel. I don't care how many people loved Jesus, followed Jesus. There is nobody standing at that cross watching that felt it greater when that sword went through his side than his mama did. And some of you mamas, you need to allow that to tap in something, wake something up in you to get on your knees and pray for that one who has gone wayward, because the wayward child is coming back. There is a prodigal that has wandered far from home, and that's your prodigal. That's your responsibility. That's the one that you can get on your knees and pray and stand in the gap for and watch them come home. So when Mary said, "Be it unto me," she said, "Be it all unto me." When God places in your heart a dream, when he places in your heart the works, and you're willing to say, "Be it unto me," I just want to remind you, it's not just the greatness that you are saying, "Be it unto me." What you're also saying is, let the cost come. Let the cost come. Because I'm willing to do, God, whatever you have called me to do, and that means I'm willing to give whatever it takes to give to get it. I want to let you know the cost is not talking about loss. You don't have to have faith to lose anything. The cost is talking about giving it away. It takes great faith to give something. It takes no faith to lose it. When we are talking about the cost, we are talking about you saying, "I give this to you, Jesus. I give it to you." We see this moment in the life of Peter. He's always an easy target. There he is at the Last Supper with Jesus. And he says, "Where are we going? I'll follow you to prison, and I'll even follow you to death." I'm sure Jesus didn't chuckle. But it would just be a few hours later where Jesus asks Peter, "Come, let's pray." See, there was a time of prayer that would have been required, a time in the presence of God that would have been required to connect your heart so much so to the will of God that you would be willing to do whatever he was asking you to do. But Peter wasn't willing to give that time in prayer. Therefore, Peter would not be willing to go to prison. Therefore, Peter would not be willing to even go to death. Peter was not willing to do the thing that he said he was willing to do because he wasn't willing to pay the cost. Which is why Jesus just went to him and said, "Wake up. It's time. You missed the whole deal. Missed the whole thing." But then at the very end, now Jesus has been crucified. He's been resurrected. He's spent time with all these disciples again. And now it comes to the end of their conversation before now Jesus is going to ascend to the side of his Father. And he looks at Peter now and he says, "Oh, by the way, that whole death thing that you were willing to follow me to when you really weren't willing to pay the cost, let's talk about that again. Peter, they're going to take you where you don't want to go. And things are going to happen that you do not want to happen. But follow me." And then he looks at John and he says, basically, life's going to be awesome for you. And then Peter, what does he say? Wait. Why him? Why is he awesome? And Jesus says, what is it to you? You just follow me. We can't compare our lives. We cannot compare the sacrifice that God has asked of us. We cannot compare the cost that God has asked to receive from us to what He's asked from someone else. We have to get in this place where our faith isn't always comparing the miracle of someone else and the pathway of someone else, because the pathway for you might look a little differently. I mean, let's think about this. Jesus healed people throughout His ministry. We see healing throughout the Gospels, from Genesis all the way to Revelation, to a man named Naaman. It was the word of the Lord that came to him and said, you leave your place in Syria, you go into the children of Israel, you speak to their prophet, and he will tell you what you need to have happen. And what happened? The prophet said to Naaman, go wash in the Jordan River 7 times. 7 times, go wash in the river. What did Naaman say? It's a nasty river. We have better rivers in Syria. Why would I be here? I'm not doing it. And then it was his servant that said, if he asked you to do something really, really hard, wouldn't you do it? See, some of the things that God asks us to do are simply experiences in obedience. They're simply an exercise in humility. The little lady with the issue of blood, she had all that she had, and she'd go to doctor, to doctor, to doctor, to doctor. It's a respectable thing. Doctor to doctor to doctor. She spent all that she had and still wasn't cured. What was her answer? What did God require of her? That she would get on her knees in a crowd of people and go all the way to the bottom and grab the hem of His garment. To a blind man, Jesus would just spit in His hands and lay hands on his eyes and he would see. To another blind man, He would make mud and wipe it on his eyes and then say, go wash in the pool of Siloam. If you're blind, you probably don't get around very well. Jesus puts mud on his eyes, which had to be extremely uncomfortable. And then He tells him, you go wash in a pool that isn't right here. He made it as inconvenient, it seems to me, just me and my way of thinking. It seems to me like that was as inconvenient as it possibly could be. And yet that was the cost that the blind man had to pay in order to be healed. What we have decided in our world, we've decided what we want. We've decided what we're willing to give. We do that and then tell God to make it happen. I lived this way for years, and I lived frustrated because I wasn't seeing the things happen that I was promised would happen. And I would just get irritated and a little more irritated and a little more irritated. And then Pastor Reggie one day said, you know what? Following, being led by the Spirit is the balance of faith. Oh, now there's an idea. Because I'm pretty sure that if Jesus healed someone today by placing mud on their eyes and sending them into a pool, we'd start writing a book. Healed by mud. My story from blindness to sight. And we would read that book and we'd highlight the chapters. And we'd talk about it and we'd be wiping mud on our eyes and washing in pools. And then we'd say we just didn't have enough faith that time. We'd go do it again. Go in the pool. Right? And all the time, if we would just get on our knees and seek Him, in the middle of our seeking Him, we might hear the cost that He would require of us to receive what He desires us to have. There's 2 words here that are used in this text. Lord and Lord. Now to us, it looks like 2 of the same words. But if we kind of got a little ornery, and I'm going to bore some of you for a minute, just hang with me, it's not going to be long. If we got a little ornery, we would just go into it and see what this actually is. The second Lord, desmotes, is a Greek word that means sovereign Lord, master. That is a positional word. That is a word that declares God over everything, and us, we're not. That's what that means. The next word that is interpreted Lord is Kyrios. That's a relational word. The relational word for Lord is over 700 times found in your New Testament. Why? Because we emphasize we are children of God. That is the New Testament emphasis. That is our emphasis. There is nothing, absolutely nothing wrong or awry in that. We are children of God. You are good because Jesus is inside of you, making you a child of God. That's a big deal. But he's also sovereign, which means he's master. And that word is only used 6 times, and maybe one of the reasons why is once you get it, you don't need it repeated to you. But here's what this forces us to embrace in this text. The same Lord who is sovereign, who declared all the good things, is the same Lord who said, this is what it's going to cost you. And when we embrace God, we embrace both sides of his character. The side of his character that makes all these promises to us, and the side of his character that says, you're going to have to go after it. And we just embrace it. Again, I'm not talking about loss. I'm not talking about sickness. I'm not talking about misery. I'm not talking about anything other than what God says you have to give to him. That's all I'm talking about. What does God require of you in order for you to receive what he has promised to give you? I mean, you think about 2 little 12-year-olds. They both talk about becoming a doctor. They want to be a physician and operate on hearts. And they talk about it, and they talk about it, and they talk about it, and they talk about it. And they even have those dumb little sets that are plastic that, you doctor you and smack you on the head with and hit your knees, all that stuff. And now all of a sudden they're 17, and they're thinking now they've got to get serious about this. And so they start looking at the cost to become the thing that they've had in their heart to become. And so now they start looking at, it's 4 years of undergraduate work, and it's 4 years of med school, and it's 5 years of residency, and it's another 3 years of a cardiac fellowship, and it's $500,000 in debt and interest. What is all that? The cost. That is what is required of them to be what they desire to be. And one says, it's too much. And they walk away from a dream. But the other says, I'll do that. I'll do that. And then they go on to save lives. I don't know what cost God would ask of you. But I know this. You'll be able to do it. And when you do it, God will do exceedingly abundantly beyond whatever you could ask or think. And when you get to the other side, you'll be like the Apostle Paul, who said, this is nothing compared to the glory. What I had to do is nothing compared to the glory on the other side. So let me close with this. God called us to go plant a church. And that was one of the most difficult things that I ever was asked to do. When I went to grad school and I missed a couple of family vacations because I was writing papers, I thought that was sacrifice. I'm sacrificing. I didn't know sacrifice until the next thing God asked us to do. And so it was Christmas time. And in the first couple years, man, you people who've started a business, you people who've gotten married, you get this. Like when you do something new, it takes everything to do it, right? I mean, it takes everything. I have met very few young married people that have anything. They're broke. Never ask a college kid for anything. They're broke. They don't have anything. You're starting something, it takes a lot to get it started. You start a business, you sink everything you have into it. Well, starting a church is no different. You just sink everything into it. And so it was Christmas time, and the kids are asking for stuff, and you're like, ah. And I remember one of them particularly asking for something, and there was no, you couldn't make it work. There was no way to make it work. And that one stupid Christmas, has frustrated me for years. Now, the last couple of years, things have been different. Things have been better. And the other day, I'm walking through the lobby, and they had this table with gift ideas. And I went to the age of one of my kids who's at the age that was at the time when I couldn't do what I wanted to do. And this little kid at this age wanted the very thing that I was not able to do years ago. I cannot tell you the joy of being able to pick up that little card and walk into that store and look for the most expensive version of that thing that I could possibly find. Why? Because the Lord is good and His mercy endures forever. And whatever cost was required on the front end, there is a greater gift on the back end. There's a greater glory from the presence of God. There's a greater manifestation of His power. There's a greater sight, the sea that I didn't see back then. And I'm just telling you, I'm just encouraging you in this. You might be on the front side of your cost. You might be at the place where you can't do all the other things that you wanted to do. And I just want to encourage you that God is good and His mercy endures forever. And if He asked you for anything, if He asked you to give Him anything, I guarantee you that there is nobody who won't see houses and lands and abundance and what God has called for you to have and called for you to see. Because if God asked of it from you, He's about to take something and pour out more than you could even imagine. If you've been standing for God to heal your body, what has He asked of from you? If you have been standing for promotion, what has He asked for from you? If you have been standing to see your kids walk in that back door and find themselves at the altar of God, what have you been standing for? What has God asked of from you? If you will give it away, God in heaven will do exceedingly, abundantly, above whatever we could ask or think.